Anna Kingsford still stands out as one of the most amazing activists who accomplished so much against so many odds in such a short amount of time. She died. Hello, welcome. My name is Dr. Coreyleewrenn. If this is your first time on the channel, I am a vegan sociologist, I'm a vegan feminist, and I am basically a professional academic in all things vegan. And in this video, I wanted to, as part of a larger project I'm working on for a book called Vegan Feminism, I'm exploring really the legacy of women doing radical intersectional work for non-human animals. And part of that project is reclaiming a history that has been lost to us, because part of the reason there's so much sexism, I think, in today's animal rights movement is that we've been detached from this great legacy of women doing important, powerful, groundbreaking work for other animals. And it has sometimes been critiqued as we're just being egocentric or making it about us. But really, I can tell you as a social movement scholar, you have to have a healthy movement. You have to have an equitable movement in order to have a sustainable and effective movement. So if you have a movement that is predominantly made up of women, and men are doing the leadership, and men are responsible for sexual harassment, and not taking feminism seriously or racism seriously or other issues seriously, the movement's just not going to be as effective as it could possibly be. One of the most effective tactics for suppressing feminism in the animal rights movement is suppressing our history. So that's what this video is about introducing, well, the series is about introducing women who I think have just been amazing contributors to the animal rights cause, but unfortunately, the average activist today would not be familiar with them. And in fact, in conducting my research for this book and through interviews with leading vegan feminists, a lot of people I would consider leaders in the field aren't even aware of some of these women that came before us and really created some of the first campaigns that we still use today, and created some of the first data and insight that we use to formulate our theories. So it's very important to remember that there were people who were working really hard in the 1800s, the early 1900s, the late 1900s, in order to make our work possible today. And perhaps one of the most amazing women in that field would have to be Anna Kingsford. I've already published a video on her contemporary, Frances Power Cobbe. Frances Power Cobbe was born much earlier than Anna Kingsford, but actually outlived Anna Kingsford by quite a bit. And I would say that Anna Kingsford owes quite a lot to Frances Power Cobbe in becoming inspired to take on anti-vivisection, vegetarianism, and other animal rights issues. So Anna Kingsford was a feminist. She was born in the 1840s, so she was coming of age in the mid-1860s. She's British. In the United Kingdom, in the mid-1860s, that's about the time when vivisection is starting to really establish itself and people are becoming aware of it and starting to resist it. So Anna Kingsford was one of the very first anti-vivisection campaigners. She was a woman of wealth. She was married. She also had a very close relationship with another man who, it may have been romantic, it may have been aromantic, it may have just been a collaboration, we don't know. But she had important men in her life that helped to support her. So she was a mother as well, but she was a wealthy woman, and that she, like many women, well-meaning and well-to-do women of the time, she thought she would use her resources, her power and resources to try to do good in the world. So she was a feminist. She's very involved with the feminist movement. And she started to work on a magazine called A Lady's Own Journal. And she served as editor for that for several weeks, months, really, which are all available online. At some point, she came into contact with Frances Power Cobbe, who started to radicalize her into anti-vivisection. And very clear from the early correspondence that they have and the writings that they have in the journal that Anna was editing, they were very clear that this was a feminist issue. This wasn't just people, humans, in the generic sense, being cruel to other animals and objectifying and exploiting and killing them in the most horrendous ways. This was men in powerful positions doing it. And they were very much so aware that women were excluded from these spaces, that women were also particularly vulnerable to also being vivisected upon, You have to remember this is the rise of medical science, and we're looking at the 1860s. And it was starting to displace an earlier system where a lot of women were healers and midwives. That was becoming increasingly stigmatized because of the powerful medical community, male-led, actively stigmatizing and outlawing women's work. And so you start to see this great divide then in the 1800s, the mid-1800s, where men are now usurping the healing work, they're usurping the knowledge production, and actively, institutionally excluding women from that. And so it wasn't just that women were fired up about what was happening to other animals. They were also fired up because this is really a battle against men versus nature, men versus women, men versus democratic access, and just civility versus violence. And indeed, civility was a major part of that. So we have a colonial background going on, which not so much the topic of today's conversation, but important to keep in mind. But I just wanted to highlight here that this was more than just women fighting on behalf of other animals. They recognized that this was deeply intersectional. I should note there's other women who've been involved in this, who were involved in anti-colonial efforts, not so much Anna Kingsford, but Charlotte Despard, Annie Besant, etc., etc. What makes Anna Kingsford really interesting is she didn't live very long. I think I'm at the time of this recording 41. I think she died at the same age as me, which is like wild to think about because of all the things she accomplished. She wrote several books. But one of the most interesting things about her that I think everyone should know, whether or not you're interested in veganism and animal rights, is that she was one of the first medical doctors in Britain. At the time when she got her degree, she couldn't get it in Britain, still outlawing women. So she went to Paris and she became medically trained there and became a doctor. Why did she do this? She wasn't really called to the medicines or the science. She was called to find out what was going on to non-human animals and to get some kind of credibility as a voice against what was happening behind closed doors. So she witnessed firsthand when she was becoming trained what was happening to non-human animals. She in her writing reflects that it was so difficult, so heartbreaking to go to class, to attend her lectures, when down the hall she could hear the moaning of suffering and dying animals. And indeed, Frances Power Cobbe and Anna Kingsford and other women who were active at this time suspected that there was an active, open, systemic violence against non-human animals because they were intending to prevent women from entering. And then they would, of course, turn around and call Anna and Frances and other people sentimentalists. But the idea was, if we make it so egregious, no one's going to want to come, women are not going to want to come here. So they suspected this is one tool to prevent women from having access to degrees and power, basically. And of course, the other hand of that was, and many of the women observed this as well, is that the boys, the male students, were being socialized. The humanity was being socialized out of them by making them observe these horrible spectacles of vivisection and participate in them. So it's a huge, huge deal then that she was able to get her medical degree, because not only being a woman, but because she cared about what happened to non-human animals, and she was in the middle of the heart of that institution and very privy to it. And I can't imagine what it must have been like. In some of my research for modern day vegan feminists, I've interviewed surgeons, veterinarians, and they've also shared that they've had to go through similar experiences in order to get to the other side and use their work to help other animals. And some of them seem to have quite a lot of really negative memories and perhaps even trauma associated with that. So this is a legacy that began a very long time ago. Women are still experiencing it today. So she doesn't stop there. She becomes a major force for anti-vivisection. She then also, unlike Frances Power Cobbe, extends her compassion to other animals, not just animals who are being tested upon. It's been speculated, there's a lot of reasons why Frances Power Cobbe perhaps did not get on board with vegetarianism. It's possible that, first off, she loved her food and just was a typical Victorian and categorized animals in certain ways and just did not see dogs and cats as animals to be messed with, but fair game on any other species. Although she did speak out about testing on reptiles, testing on horses in veterinary schools, etc., which were quite cruel and horrible, and I won't recount them here. But she pretty much stayed away from vegetarianism, and in fact attacked Anna Kingsford because she was a vegetarian and actively promoted it. So what Anna Kingsford also did at the turn of the 20th century, she wrote one of the very first books on vegetarianism. And it wasn't just a book on the ethics of vegetarianism, although there was quite a lot of that in there. The book was primarily an anthropological and medical approach to vegetarianism. So you need to remember that at this time, at the turn of the 20th century, nutritional science is still being figured out. But she was able to look at different countries and say, well, look, all these countries of the world, Ireland, India, etc., the colonies, these people are working extremely hard, laboring in the fields on vegetarian, even vegan diets, and they're perfectly fine. But also through her medical training, she's able to go through all the other nutritional and biological reasons why vegetarianism is perfectly fine for human beings. She wasn't vegan. There is pretty ample discussion in that book about consuming milk, butter, and probably eggs. I can't remember now. But the idea was, this is before the Vegan Society. Vegans were certainly active at this time, but not organized at this time. So it was a huge deal that she's written this book, one of the first books we have on vegetarianism, and probably the first one that I can think of on the science of vegetarian nutrition. So what an amazing, amazing contribution to the movement she was. But that's not all. She was also very, very interested in, like many reformers of her period, using religion in order to advance a better world. So she was a Christian. She was very involved in the Theosophy Society. Can't say it. But she was also a psychic. And she would hold this, remember, she's active in the late 1800s, right? So this is the height of occultism in British Victorian society. And so she would hold seances where she would actually communicate with animals that had been vivisected upon. She had dream communications with them as well. And she's written about this. There's some soul in the world who's continuing to host a website, I think it's annakingsford.com, where all of her work has been cataloged. She was a prolific author. And she actually has a book, for instance, on where she recorded her dreams. And in these dreams, she had these elaborate conversations with other animals who had been subject to all sorts of institutional speciesism, not just vivisection, but I think there's also a conversation she has with a cart horse. So she's able to transgress the communication barrier, not just a communication barrier in that she speaks the language of a primate and they speak languages of horses and dogs or whatever, but also she's overcoming that barrier of these are animals that are separated away in the hidden streets of Victorian London or the hidden laboratories in these Parisian medical schools. She's able to use this psychic awareness in order to try to overcome barriers and find justice as well. So she's a prolific writer on all these types of topics. She was a metaphysical type of being. And the people who write about her, who are in her presence, say that she was a sort of being from another world. She had a sort of ethereal presence about her. This has also been speculated as to why perhaps Frances Power Cobbe was not so keen on her, because she was so beautiful and popular. And it seems like Frances Power Cobbe may have been a bit of a narcissist with regards to her behavior towards others. Definitely a bully. And unfortunately, that would take a toll on Anna Kingsford. Edward Maitland, the man I mentioned earlier, who was her lifelong companion, recorded that after she died, that it caused her such great distress and worry and anxiety that Frances Power Cobbe had been bullying her so much. And bullied her for lots of reasons. Bullied her because she was a woman who was active in the political sphere when she was a wife and mother. She bullied her for her vegetarianism. So unfortunately, that could have been a great and amazing collaboration that sustained their careers, but it did not. But that said, Anna Kingsford still stands out as one of the most amazing activists who accomplished so much against so many odds in such a short amount of time. She died very, very early, I think in 1888. So that's Anna Kingsford, and there's probably more I could say on her, but that's probably enough to get you going. Just remembering that we had women who did this amazing work, who went into the heart of these ugly, nasty cesspits of speciesism, survived them, sustained them, and then was able to create something amazing out of that. And don't get me wrong, it really, really took a toll on her to do this work. And I mean, I think that's something that a lot of us can sympathize with, empathize with even. But yeah, so if it's in your practice, definitely check out the work of Anna Kingsford, but maybe also let us honor our fairy foremothers of vegan feminism and perhaps light a candle in her honor.